All right, in 3, 2, 1.
Go! This is the podcast!
Are you telling me that you built a time machine? Out of a podcast?
I have come here to chew bubblegum and
podcast.
And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Hey everyone, welcome to Get to the Podcast. That's Get to the Podcast with the number 2. My name is Diego D'Souza.
I'm Nick Gambino.
And I'm Neil Carson.
We have a really special guest today. He's the director of a few movies that you may or may not heard of. You know,
Maybe.
Maybe you haven't heard of a movie called Grease. Just a little best musical of all time. That's my opinion.
Loving.
Yeah.
Had me a blast.
Exactly. So we got Grease. He's directed The Blue Lagoon, Flight of the Navigator, White Fang, Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, and so many others. He's an Emmy-nominated director of TV. Before that, he's got a fantastic-looking new VR series called Defrost coming out April 25th. And welcome to the show, Randal Kleiser.
Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, it's good having
you.
you.
I listened to your podcast just before I came on. I came on here, and it's very energetic.
Good.
Thank you. Thank
Oh,
you.
great.
We try to do that. We're slugs in real life, but when we get on the mic, we try to be as energetic as we can. Usually when we do these interviews, like I said before we actually started recording, with your your list of credits and some of these movies you did, a lot of these are movies we've all loved for so many years. This interview could easily go 7-8 hours, but I know that none of us have that kind of time. And we'd probably,
right.
That's like a marathon interview. So we're going to try to keep this a little shorter than that. But we usually like to go chronological and start early on. So I wanted to kind of get a flavor of how you got into filmmaking early on. I know you started in TV. I saw some things where you actually had the honor of like shadowing Jerry Lewis at one point on film set.
That was mine.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. Diego wanted to bring that up. But
I love Jerry. By the way, I love and I have so much respect for Jerry Lewis. He's my favorite
Me too.
comedian.
Yeah, he was
amazing. So incredible. Everything he did with kids, all his movies. I still watch a lot of
some of the
his
things
films.
he created and invented for the film set are still being used today. I mean, that's crazy. People don't realize the kind of innovations the guy had as a filmmaker.
Correct, yeah.
Outside of just his performances. But
one of the great things that I got to do was, because I'm on the Directors Guild Special Projects Committee, I often do visual histories with different directors, and I interview them for the website. And I did one with Jerry Lewis that was just fantastic. And it's at dga.org, and then you can just click on Jerry Lewis and you can hear it or see it. It's a video interview.
I'm going to check it out.
He was an amazing teacher, and we all thought it was going to be like the nutty professor comes to college and tells jokes, but it wasn't at all. He was talking about all the inventions that he did, and he knew how to work with actors, and he knew how to do technical stuff. So he called the combination the total filmmaker, and he wrote a book that was written from our class, from his lectures, the tapes, and it's called The Total Filmmaker, and it's out of print, but worth a lot of money now, like $1,000 to get a copy.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Didn't he have something to do with Colorama?
I don't know about that. I know he brought the Nagra in, the sound recording device Nagra, and he created the video assist.
The monitor on set, right? Kind of the video village kind of a thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, if we can go a little earlier, how did you actually get into filmmaking? Like, what was your transition and going, okay, that's something I want to do?
I wanted to be an animator for Walt Disney because I watched the show, Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color, every Sunday at home in Philadelphia. And that was the only thing out there that told anything about behind the scenes of filmmaking. Today, you can learn about everything on so many levels with the internet, but there's no internet there, just the Walt Disney Show. So I started copying the way they made cartoons, where you ink on one side of a clear cell and paint on the other. And I made some animated cartoons, took them. My family drove across the country to Walt Disney Studios. I took the box, my little yellow Kodachrome box of the film I did to show Walt Disney, and got to the gate, and the policeman there with a Mickey Mouse on his shoulder said, if you don't have an appointment, you can't get in. So we went back to Philadelphia, and I gave up cartoons and I started doing live action 8mm films. and that's how I got started.
Wow. How old were you then?
12.
12. Okay. So you really had that early interest, which I feel like that wasn't a thing. Like you said, the internet wasn't around. People getting interested in doing filmmaking and animation at 12 years old is probably rare.
Yeah, it was very unusual. Even when I started doing 8 millimeter narrative films when I was 13, from then on I was doing it, and no one else that I knew was. I guess out here Spielberg was, and a couple other people were doing it. Joe Dante, I think, was doing it, but there was not really a lot of people that I know of that were obsessed in making these little 8 millimeter films.
Right.
And it was not that easy, you know. I mean, you had to buy the film, you had to process it, pay for its processing it. There's no sound, and you had to figure out a way to make the sound work and have it be in sync. It was really hard. And today, of course, with iPhones and you can do everything right there.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, was that your film school, or did you actually attend like formal film school? Or was it you just messing around with 8 millimeter?
I was just doing it on my own until I went to USC Film School.
Right.
I applied and got into that, and that was the days when it was thought of like basket weaving. You know, when you showed up at the campus, people thought you were just trying to get easy A's by watching movies. There was no real respect for film school back then, and there were very few of them, maybe three film schools in the United States, and now there's thousands.
Oh yeah. And then was that your springboard into, because I mean you look at your credits, it's, you know, Starsky and Hutch and all these great TV shows. You were primarily doing that. You're Emmy nominated director. Was that, did you go film school TV? Was that the transition?
I made a master's thesis at USC called Peach, which was about my grandmother and my family, and it turned out really well, and I wanted to get a distributor. I wanted Universal to distribute it. I sent it over there, and they said, well, we don't distribute shorts, but we like your directing, so we want you to come and start directing TV. And so I went right out of my master's thesis, right out of film school, and into directing at Universal television shows. And that was kind of unusual, too. I mean, the movie that I did, Peach, was, it was a very emotional type of story, and I was able to get actors that were recognizable in it because I met a casting director at a party who read the script and said he'd help me. And so we got Bruce Davison and Barbara Rush and William Shallard and Jeanette Nolan, who are all working those in TV. So my little student film looked like a regular professional TV show.
Wow. I didn't realize you went that far back with Bruce Davison, who's in your new Defrost series.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Bruce and I have worked many, many, many times, and we've become very, very close. I'm the godfather to his son.
Wow.
We actually had run against each other in track back in high school, but didn't realize that we were from two different schools. But you know, we figured out that we never met, but we actually ran against each other in track.
Wow,
that's funny.
Jeez. Did you ever think, did you ever think that your story in terms of filmmaking, how you got into TV then movies, ever paralleled Steven Spielberg's? You mentioned him earlier, 8 millimeter.
Yes, it did parallel his, because we actually worked on the same show the first time. Marcus Welby, MD.
I was going to mention that.
He directed one, I directed one. And then he went on to TV movies like Duel, and I went into about 4 TV movies, Boy in the Plastic Bubble. And so, yeah, we had very, very similar launches.
Right. Mentioning Boy in the Plastic Bubble. You had a very interesting progression, because you went TV show, then you went TV movies. And Boy in the Plastic Bubble is one of John Travolta's first or early credits, like movies that he did. I saw that.
Yeah, it's the first time he had a leading role.
Right. I think he came out, he was in Carrie that same year, which was definitely a supporting role.
Yeah, but he was playing a supporting role in that one.
Yeah, it was a douchebag role, is what we call it. Yeah, but that movie, Boy in the Plastic Bubble, I watched that a couple times as a kid, and I loved it. I never realized that you had directed it, until recently. I was like, oh, Jesus, that guy.
Well, it was very helpful because, John and I got along real well, and when they were figuring out who to direct Grease, John suggested me.
Oh, that's how that happened.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when did you come on to the Grease? Because this is your first feature film. Like, you've done TV movies at this point. This is your first feature. How does that actually happen? Other than him recommending you, did you come in like on the script process early on, or like where did that actually fall in?
One of my TV movies was called All Together Now, which I directed for Robert Stigwood. So he knew of my work, knew that I could come in on time and on budget with something that made sense. And then Alan Carr, the other producer, I met at many, many, many parties in Hollywood. You know, he was a wonderful party giver, knew everybody in town, and I would get into these parties and I would, chat him up, and I told him I had this script I wanted to do, Blue Lagoon, and so I was on his radar, and I was on Stigwood's and Travolta. So when they all got together to say who should we have directed, I was probably the only guy they all knew.
But you had no musical background at that point, or did you? Did you like?
My musical background was being an extra in many, many musicals. When I was at film school, I worked on Hello Dolly and Thoroughly Modern Millie and Camelot, and probably the best training was being an extra and a dancer in 3 Elvis Presley movies.
What? Wow.
Okay, how many times am I going to bow down to you in this podcast?
Wow, so you were in 3 Elvis Presley movies as an extra.
Yes, as an extra. So, and in one, you can actually see, I have a little bit with Elvis where I'm dancing with a girl at a club, and he pulls her up on stage to dance with him, and then I pull her back down into the audience.
What?
And that was a lot of fun. It was called Double Trouble, and I think
Double Trouble.
It's on YouTube. You can sort of check out that scene, you know.
That's crazy.
So you're one of the only guys who ever took a woman away from
Elvis. That really should be at the top of your bio. That's
a good idea. Yeah, I'm writing a book, another book, a biography. So that's a good idea.
Perfect. Just name that your biography. The title: The Only Guy Who Ever Took a Girl from Elvis.
Elvis, yeah.
Okay, so you'd been around musicals, but this is the first time you're going to be like helming the ship. Which turned out to be, I'm just going to say it, and I'm sure you've heard this a bunch, but in my opinion, Grease is the greatest musical of all time. I know some people would say West Side Story or this or that. For me, it's Grease all the way. I just rewatched it again recently for the 1,000th time. I showed my daughter. She's 3 years old, and she loved it. Like, it works on so many levels.
How does your daughter like the lyrics of Grease
don't even,
Lightning?
No, don't bring that up. Don't bring that up. I plugged her ears. I didn't know, because I saw that movie a million times as a kid, and I never realized those lyrics were in there. There's cursing, there's sexual references. I didn't get any of that when I was a kid. I didn't even get the pregnancy scare when I was a kid. Somehow that went right over, because that's thought of as a family film.
Yeah.
But somehow those things, which you will get as an adult, as a kid, they fly right over, but you could still enjoy the film. That's
Correct,
it's weird how it works that way.
Well, whenever I show it to college students and I ask them if they noticed anything different about the movie when they saw it this time, and all their hands go up and they laugh.
Yeah, it's like the only musical you think of where they rhyme tit and shit. You know, it definitely goes out there, and I never realize that until I was probably in my 20s, and I'd seen it like at least 1,000 times. But okay, so you're gonna helm this movie now. It's the first time you're gonna be steering the ship on a musical.
Right. Well, my background in being an extra in dance numbers was very helpful, because I was able to be on the set for days, seeing how directors would break down a song into phrases, so that they'd say playback, and they would play that section, and you work on just that section, and then go back and do it over and over again until you got it right, and then move on to the next section. And this is before music videos, so there was nobody really doing anything like that. And it was a tradition of old Hollywood musicals, how you did that. And so observing that for days and days and days, I was all trained. When I got to the set, I knew exactly what to do.
Right. Okay. So so you brought that to Grease. You obviously had, dance choreographers. You had John Travolta, who was a fantastic dancer. Olivia Newton-John, who came from the world of music. I'm sure all of that helped. When you think back on Grease, is there a point when you go, well, the most difficult part of that job was blank?
I had a partner the whole time who was Pat Birch, the choreographer, because she had been the choreographer of the Broadway hit show Grease. It was a big hit before I got involved.
Right.
And she knew everything about how the audience reacted to every line and every song. So she was really the one person that was with me the whole time, and made it much, much easier than it would have ever been. So I think I don't feel that there was a huge horror moment. I mean, I think it went pretty smoothly. The Paramount left us alone because they didn't think that this would do much more than be a summer musical for kids.
Right.
And so they were more concerned with other movies shooting at the time, like Heaven Can Wait with Warren Beatty and
Right.
Going South with Jack Nicholson. Those were their big movies that they were paying attention to, and we were a little teen musical that was going to go away, they thought.
Right. And out of those 3 movies, those 2 are great. I've seen both of them, but
Yeah.
Grease ended up standing the test of time, becoming legendary. It's funny. It's funny how that works. Almost you're left to your own devices, and you're allowed to just create.
Thank God, because I've been doing other movies where the studio gets really, really involved, and it's very annoying. Very annoying.
I'm sure. And you mentioned Pat Birch. She's the one who went on to direct Grease too, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So she was in a prime position to do that, which was one of the early Michelle Pfeiffer vehicles and Max Caulfield.
I think it was first movie.
Yeah, exactly. Again, when I was growing up, I saw both of those movies. I saw Grease 2 several times growing up, and I always thought that was Lorenzo Lamas' character from the first one. That's somehow in my head, because he had that blonde, blue-eyed look thing going on in the second one, and I thought that was Lorenzo Lamas from the first one. You know how you do that as a kid? You just cross your wires.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a kid, maybe you see that.
Yeah, and I was like, wait a minute, why is Sandy cousin? Why was he dating her in the first one if he's Sandy's cousin? Like, what's going on here? So when Grease hits, that was a instant hit, right? When it came out, it wasn't like it did slow business. It busted out, correct?
Well, one of the things that made it so big was John Travolta had just done Saturday Night Fever, and 4 of our songs were being rotated heavily before the movie came out.
Gotcha.
Oh, wow, yeah.
On the radio. So, we had hit songs on the radio, John Travolta from Saturday Night Fever, and, that launched it instantly.
Right. So I know you have a book coming out for Grease, right? Basically, like director's notes from Grease.
Yeah, it's called Grease Director's Notebook, and HarperCollins is putting it out on October 22nd. It's my script with all my notes on the margins and all my storyboards. It has Albert Walsky's costume designs and interviews with the cast. I went back and talked to them about what it was like then and how it's affected their lives since. And we have lots and lots of photos that were never seen before, that were behind the scenes, that were taken by some of the cast and taken by Paramount but never shown before. I went through the archives and saw every single photo that was ever taken and pulled the best ones. So it's really going to be, for Grease fans, it's going to be like a real surprise.
That's awesome. So it's basically the ultimate Bible for a Grease fan, basically.
It'll be the ultimate Bible for Grease fans, yes, and especially since you'll be able to see all the lines that were written that were supposed to be in the movie, and I crossed them out, and you can see the ones that if we had shot them, they would not have worked. That I think that's one of my best contributions is what we cut out, because there were a lot of lines that just didn't work, and I think that editing job was pretty good.
That's awesome. So that's the closest we'll come to really seeing deleted scenes, right? Because I've never seen. I've owned the special edition Grease. I've never seen deleted scenes from the film. Maybe I'm crazy and they exist, but
no, we shot one scene that was deleted, but it got lost somewhere. But most of it is stuff that I just never shot.
So you never shot it even? Okay.
On the set, I said, this doesn't work. Let's move on.
Right.
And luckily, I was able to do that.
Right. Because you have a writing background, right? Like this is if some directors who are like, I'd prefer not to write, but you have this. Obviously, there's that director thing saying this doesn't work. But did you actually rewrite the lines yourselves as it went? Be like, let's try this line.
Yes, normally I do, but on Grease, the way we worked it was most of the actors, or a lot of them, had been in the Broadway production, so they knew where the laughs were and how it played, and we pretty much went back to the play whenever we were having a conflict about whether something worked or not, because the play did work.
Gotcha. Okay, and I've seen. So I saw the in the early '90s. they had a production of Grease on Broadway. It came back like 92, 93. Rosie O'Donnell was in it as Rizzo. Brooke Shields was in it as Rizzo. And I saw it I saw it on Christmas Day, 93, I think it was, when Brooke Shields was playing Rizzo. And
that's right. I went and saw it too. Yeah,
you did.
It was very surreal to see Brooke playing Rizzo.
Right, because she was in Blue Lagoon, but she was also, now doing Grease, which you had done the film version of.
Yeah, it was. And I had surreal moments in my life.
I'm sure. And I remember that play because I was already a big fan. So I was 7 years old, 8 years old at the time. And I remember watching it going, wow, there's actually different stuff in this play than what was in the movie. Like there's sometimes entirely different scenes. And I really was planning on thinking I was going to go in and just see a stage production of the movie, never having seen a stage version of it.
Right.
So it's interesting that you say that you actually kind of kept going back to the play, which had preceded the movie, and used that to kind of inform different scenes.
That's right. And we added a lot of new songs, like 4 new songs, and changed it from Chicago to Southern California, and changed the leading lady, Sandy, into an Australian so that Olivia wouldn't have to try an American accent.
Smart.
Things like that.
Right. I'm guessing Summer Nights was a new song if you put it in Southern California for the movie?
That was part of the Broadway play. That was
okay.
And that was the one thing that made me know that I wanted to do the movie. When I watched Summer Nights on stage, the boys were on the left side of the stage, and the girls were on the right. And I listened and watched that, and imagined cutting back and forth between the two groups, and ending up with a split screen at the end. And that's what got me really excited about doing the movie.
That's awesome. So, okay, the book is Grease Director's Notebook, and it's coming out October 22nd. HarperCollins?
That's right.
Well, I'm going to get it. I'm getting it because I'm a Grease fanatic. So, and I'm also I love film and behind the scenes stuff. So I've got behind the scenes of all my favorite movies. I've got, like Scorsese stuff. I've got, Ghostbusters and Back to the Future, big reference books, and they're just filling my shelves.
Basically,
people are like, how do you
trying to say
read
is
those
that-
things? They're basically encyclopedias. I'm like, it's easy. You just read them. And then you geek out for an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Well, basically, what Nick's trying to say is that his wife is mad at him that she can't have access
She's
to the
one that
garage.
highlights them. She puts them all on the shelves, and she's
so
proud
true.
of my movie fanaticism. She really is. Yeah.
Nick, we cannot just have 1/4 for the house to be functional.
She loves it.
Oh yes, well,
Yeah.
I was like a geek too on movies, but there's nothing that I could ever see when I was a kid. There's nothing going on.
It's a different world. Like now, like you said, with the internet and everything. But even when I was growing up, we didn't have the internet. We had just going to the movies. But I lived in New York, and there were 6, 7 movie theaters. I lived a block and a half from Times Square. So.
Oh, you're lucky.
Oh yeah, it was insane. I mean, it was so gritty, but there were so many movie theaters. Like there were 7 movie theaters in a 5-minute walk from me. And my dad was obsessed. I mean, he grew up on movies, going to the 25 cent. He always remembers seeing, Phantom of the Opera and all these different films, and he would just love spending his weekends at the theater. So when we were growing up, that's what he did, and he took us to whatever he wanted to see, which is why I saw so many of these films. It was really selfish of him, but he passed on his love of film to me, and our weekends were filled with just going to the theaters. So I had that at least.
To develop an obsession, and today everything is at your fingertips. Every movie ever made you can find and see. So it's so different now, and you had to really be driven back then, but now you can just click and you're there.
Yep, it's that easy. And we've talked about this a lot on the podcast. It's unfortunate. It's like inflation. It drives down the value with how easily accessible it is. And so it's a bit sad. Like when we were growing up, we would have never dreamed of this, and we would have loved it and voted yes immediately to this kind of access. But at the same time, there's so much and it's so readily available. It's sort of like, well, I liked when it was just a little bit harder to reach for. And then, you know what I mean?
Yes, I agree. It was fun to look in the papers and see when there's a reissue of a movie, or track something down and go see it with people who love it, as opposed to just see it in your room by yourself,
Exactly.
I think the issue that I have is that there's a lot of mystery that's gone from filmmaking, from going to watch
Yeah,
it.
so it's YouTube. On YouTube, you can find everything that behind the scenes that's being done, which is a good thing for filmmakers, young filmmakers. You practically don't have to go to film school. You can just learn everything on the internet.
Yeah, or just listen to stupid podcasts like this where we're just highlighting all the master secrets. It's terrible.
Let me ask you. I love personal stories from people, artists that we talk to. What is some moments in your career that you fell in love with?
Well, I did a movie called Portrait of Grandpa Doc, and it was a short. It was about my grandfather, and I restaged. He was the man who sent me to art school when I was a little kid, and I went back to the house on the beach in Seaside Park, New Jersey, where it happened, and I was luckily able to get Melvin Douglas to play my grandfather, and I sat him in the chairs where he had told me I'm gonna send you to art school, and where he had given me my first job and everything. I recreated all those moments with Melvin Douglas in the spot where they happened, and that was pretty amazing. You know, I really couldn't believe I lucked to do that. And when I did It's My Party, I did a lot of work with recreating real moments from that. There was a real party where my friend, you know, had a last party and had all his friends together, and at the end of the party he took his life, and everybody who was at that party, you know, was changed by it. And I interviewed everybody and wrote that up and restaged all that with actors. So there's been several times that I've done that. Page, my master's thesis, was based on visiting my grandmother in a nursing home, and that was all based on the dialogue, and the look is based on reality. So I've had many times where I've been recreating moments from my past, and that's been very fulfilling in kind of I guess a therapeutic way.
Right, that's what I was going to ask. Like cathartic. Like there's something about being able to revisit and communicate it through art. You almost have your own revelations when you're doing it, I'm sure.
That's true, yes.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Incredible. So what does that mean for you when you have, I mean, you've obviously been successful at that point, done TV, this is your first movie, it's a big hit. Where do you go from there?
Well, it was great because suddenly, you know, I had some credibility, and I could get my dream project off the ground, which was Blue Lagoon.
Mm-hmm.
And no one would talk to me ahead of time. But after Grease, they would have meetings with me, but they still wouldn't finance Blue Lagoon because they said nobody's going to watch two people in a movie, just two people with nothing else. And I said, well, I disagree. And Frank Price at Columbia greenlit that. He's the man who had hired me to start directing TV at Universal. So twice in my career, he gave me a leg up.
Right. Now, Blue Lagoon, again, and I got to clarify this. So my dad didn't believe in censorship when I was a kid, so I just watched every movie that existed ever from a very young age.
And are you all destroyed by it?
Oh, I'm dysfunctional as hell.
It's
not
very
even
much dysfunctional.
No. I'm the worst person in this room by far. No. I'm actually not. No, honestly, I in a way it made me more precocious. Like I felt like I understood more from an early age because it wasn't like I was being sheltered or spoon-fed information. I was just getting it all. And
when did you first see porno?
Oh, geez. Well, let's see. I was. Well, no, because the first time. No, I'll answer the question.
I think he was born with a VHS.
I'm an open book. No, the first time was actually this magazine. I grew up in Hell's Kitchen, New York, right, in the 80s and the 90s, which was a pretty terrible place at the time. There was this porno magazine that was ripped up right next door in this little like open garden in front of an apartment next door, and it was like 100 pages of just pornography just hanging around. And I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna go find out what women look like naked, and I just snatched them all up, and it was the first, and I almost threw up. Honestly, I was like maybe 7 years old. It was too. My brain could not handle. I'm like, this is too much to process. So yeah.
Imagine what it's like for kids today, where they can accidentally click on color, full color sound version of that.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how people bring up kids today. It's amazing.
It's true. I think you almost have to bring up with a bit of censorship. Like I agree with what my dad did, but for today, where information is too accessible, I'm curbing this a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
So the Blue Lagoon, I watched that a couple times as a kid. I think the
Yeah.
first time I watched it, I was probably like 9 years old, and I loved that movie. Like honestly, outside of
It's so
whatever
uncensored.
whether it was appropriate or not for me, I loved the story. You know what I mean? It's like as if later on you see Titanic with Rose and Jack, and if they had basically survived and ended up on an island. Here you go. This is the story, and what would actually happen. You have the pregnancy and the sickness and the stepping on the thing that gives her,
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. Was that an original story or is that based on a book? I never even looked that up.
That was written in around 1895 by an English writer named Henry de Vere Stackpoole, and I happened to be in the library at Santa Monica when I was, I guess, in college. I don't know, and I just saw the title, The Blue Lagoon, and it sounded interesting, so I started flipping through it. And it read kind of like a Robert Louis Stevenson classic, and so I always kept it and never returned the book, and wanted to make a movie out of it, and that was a dream to do that, and I finally got to do it.
Right.
That's awesome.
So when that started coming together, you had Brooke Shields in the movie, who was already a pretty popular child actress. How did that whole pre-production and that production happen?
Well, I saw a lot of people for that movie. I videotaped a lot of people. One of them was Kelly Preston, who's now called Kelly Travolta.
Wow.
We flew her in I saw a picture of her in a magazine, and I flew her in to LA for a screen test. And she said, "Someday I'm going to marry John Travolta." And I thought, yeah, right.
No.
And she came across too mature for this character, so we didn't use her. But we did have Diane Lane as the lead, and Willie Ames. That was the original cast.
Wow.
And just before we started shooting, they called and said we decided we don't want to do nudity and we're backing out. So I had to quickly recast, and I always wanted Brooke, but she was tall and Willie was short, so I had to find a new guy. I cast Brooke, and then I started looking for a guy, and we just went through all of our videotapes and saw Chris, who had like 80s hair, and so I thought if we just frizzed his hair, he'd look kind of like an island guy, and so that's how it all came about.
Right, and that's Chris Atkins, who's also in your new Defrost VR series, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, I try to pull favorites from everybody when I need to.
There you go.
Right. So, okay, that's interesting. Diane Lane, I didn't know that she was ever attached to it before. This is pre-Outsiders Diane Lane, too. This is pre anybody knowing who Diane Lane was.
Yeah, I think she'd been on the cover of Time magazine for her first movie with Laurence Olivier. I forget the name of it.
Okay.
But yeah, she was an up-and-coming young actress.
Where did you film that? Like, where was that one? Because that's all done pretty much like stranded, deserted island.
We flew around Queensland to look for a place. We went to Tahiti. But there was a movie made before called The Blue Lagoon in the 40s. And I wanted to find the island where they filmed that. And it was in Fiji. So I got on a seaplane and I flew around the Yasawa Islands looking for this particular beach that had a little island off of it. And from the air, I could see the configuration, and we landed the seaplane and went up on the beach. Turned out it was the same beach, and then it was owned by an American, the whole island, and so I made a deal with him to bring everybody there. And it was very complicated because there was no roads or electricity or any way to get there, aside from seaplanes or boats. But I just had this instinct that I wanted to film in the same spot as the first movie. And so I had Nestor Almendros, the great cinematographer, and when we filmed on that beach for the first time, the kids arriving on the beach, Nestor said, "I feel the ghost of Jeffrey Unsworth," and he was the cinematographer of the first movie. So the whole thing was wonderful. It was like a great experience. I loved it.
Wow. Did you do kind of like the John Huston African Queen thing, like do everything off dinghies and trying to just, because you said there was no electricity, there was nothing, it was kind of this a lone island. Did you have to like kind of ship over every day on little boats, or how did that?
Well, no, we all lived on the island. We built a tent city, and I got a crew from Australia, and when I interviewed the crew, I said, have you ever been camping? And if they said no, then I eliminated them. So we had a crew of Australians who had all been camping, and we were on tents, and we had a yacht outside, a big yacht that sort of like well, it wasn't a big yacht. It was a small tourist boat that a lot of the crew lived on, and then we brought barges of water in, and we built trails to get from one side of the island to the other, and we set up a big screen, like an outdoor movie drive-in screen, and a portable projector with a generator. And then we would film. We had 3 units going, first unit, second unit, and underwater unit. And we'd send all of our dailies, they became weeklies because they got in the seaplane and went to Australia and then came back a week later, and we would sit we put blankets down in the area with the drive-in screen and watched all the units. And everybody would applaud each other's units, and it was just a magical time.
That's awesome. That's literally like you put yourselves in the trenches together and you kind of bond, Literally. But here it's like a deserted island.
It was like summer camp, you know, but everybody was working on one project. It was really fun.
That's awesome. Well, and it's really unfortunate that we can't hit every movie you've done. I mean, I'm going to skip right over Grandview, USA, which has Jamie Lee Curtis and C. Thomas Howell. And I'm just going to go to the next one because, like I said, this could be a 7-hour interview. And nobody has any time for that. Even the listeners. They're like, I'm not going to listen to 7 hours. So if you don't mind, I'm going to jump to this next classic you did. And especially from kids who grew up in the 80s, they love this film. And it really is a great film, Flight of the Navigator. So, what again, Tiago, this is one of his favorites. That's his E.T. That's his E.T.
Okay.
Just to give you an
I
idea.
literally feel that this film was underrated because it's the storyline, even like the ending when he goes back, like everything that's involved in this film is just so incredible. The details, the songs, Max, like everything that's a part of this film, just literally I fell in love with as my childhood. It literally was like, I would say that I loved watching this more than E.T.
Right.
I really did. I just because I'm a sci-fi junkie, so being that in the film, it was just
I'll tell you,
awesome.
It's kind of like a Twilight Zone episode. You know what I mean?
Diego.
Yes.
Do you have a brother?
No, I do not.
Oh, okay. There's a big theme about that. A lot of people who have brothers relate to Flight of the Navigator because it's the story of a younger brother who becomes an older brother with time travel, and that's a dynamic that most people who have brothers think about and go, wow, wouldn't that be wild?
Yeah, it's funny because I rewatched it recently. I hadn't seen it in a few years. I rewatched it recently, and I do have that because I have a brother. I have an older brother who's like my younger brother, so we kind of flip-flopped in our lifetime.
Yeah.
Neil knows him. He knows what I'm talking about. So he's like 5 years older than me, and as a kid, he was always older than me, but then at one point, we kind of are, he's kind of my younger brother now as we're adults. And I related to the movie, like watching it even as an adult, going, yeah, that's pretty much us. I mean, we were always punching each other as kids and making fun of each other, but then there's that love there, that's your brother.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, I didn't. I think what connected me to the film was just the adventure that this kid went through.
Yeah.
When it came, what happened at the creek, and he fallen, hitting his head, and then suddenly he's just somewhere else.
I love the cut at that point.
Yeah, it was just so well done.
Yeah, that cut where he actually technically jumps. I think it's 8 years into the future.
Correct. Yeah, it's like they never found. And then
but the cut is really interesting because it's sort of like, well, was that? You look at it, and you're like, was that an accidental cut? Like, was that? And then you go, oh no, it makes sense. Like he just went click. He's 8 years ahead. And like I said, it reminded me of a Twilight Zone episode in terms of the way it plays out. It's like this subtle sci-fi element that doesn't need to do this big wondrous thing when he transitions into the future with these big glowing things. It's just like, snap, the sound changes. And, I love that scene.
And the family aspect of it.
Yeah.
Because even when he was in the future and the family was having him, they were doing research on the kid. They were just testing him, and the family and the kid literally spoke out about he needs to go back.
Right.
And they helped him. I mean, it was just really like, it was just incredible. This film, this is hard for me because like I'm watching the film in my head as I'm trying to talk about it. Every scene being replayed right now in my head. And the dog, what was the dog's name again?
Oh, Bruiser.
Bruiser, yeah,
Bruiser.
He was the one that towards the end found him in the woods at the end of the film, right? Because he went back.
Yeah, I guess so.
No, because he was on the boat. No, the dog was already in the boat with the family when he came back, and they had the sparklers, and they were like, get in the boat, and he's happy to see them. They don't know that anything's changes. They're like, you were gone for a while. And he's like, yeah, freaking, I was jumped 8 years in the future, but I guess you didn't realize that.
Yeah.
No, the dog was already in the boat when they were about to go off with the sparklers at the end. I'm sorry. We're talking so much about the film, but I want to find out from the director of the film, how this movie came about.
Well, Disney. Let's see. I did it for Disney, and I'm trying to remember what reason. I guess it was after Blue Lagoon, maybe. I'm not sure where it came, but
It's about 6 years after Blue Lagoon in terms of the release.
I see.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I think it was my first Disney movie, and I think one of the things I wanted to experiment with was special effects. My brother Jeff Kleiser is a visual effects supervisor who worked on Tron, and he was an early pioneer in
That's the first CGI film. That's the first film with CGI in it. Huh?
Right, and he worked on that. And so I wanted to experiment with something that had not been done before and not been seen. I wanted to make Flight of the Navigator have some element in it that was new, and that became the spaceship, which is the first time that more digital morphing and image-based lighting was used, where we took each frame of the movie and wrapped it onto a computer-generated wireframe of the ship, which made it look like it was a mirror. And so combining that with the morphing and the changing of the shape were the new elements that had not been seen before in movies.
Wow.
I just replayed the scene when it went from a Volkswagen to a Porsche.
Well, when in maneuver, third grade maneuver or whatever they call it, and then it morphs into that thing and it shoots off.
I have the model that we used for that, and I took it once to a midnight showing of Flight of the Navigator, and I pulled it out of my bag, and the whole audience gasped.
I'm sure. That's awesome.
To see that.
Yeah. The kid you got for it, the main kid, fantastic actor. Like that just whole those emotional scenes. I have this thing. Yeah, Joey Kramer. I have this thing where I go, and it's probably a very amateur way of looking at acting, but I'm like, if you can show teardrops through both eyes at the same time, you're a fantastic actor. It's like Demi Moore in Ghost. And he had that ability at that young age, and I thought that was impressive.
He did have amazing life after that, and there's a documentary I'm working with the people on called Life After the Navigator, and it's the story of Joey Kramer and what happened to him afterwards.
Really?
Yes, he got involved with drugs, and then he needed to get off them, and he couldn't afford it. There was the only place he could research finding a place to get off of meth was in a prison.
Wow.
And so he robbed a bank and was arrested and thrown in prison, and then got into the program and got off drugs, and now he's out and trying to be an actor again.
Wow.
That's amazing.
I had no idea.
Yeah, his name is the name of the documentary is Life After the Navigator, and I don't know when it's coming out, but it's being filmed now.
Okay, we're definitely going to check that out. Yeah, I was wondering where he was, because I think he'd done a few things after that, but then he was kind of gone from film. But you said he's getting back into film, right, as an actor? That's great.
He's working on that now.
That's fantastic.
He's been to a lot of autograph conventions, and people mob him because they're so excited to see him. And when they hear his story, they really. He has a little daughter, and he writes songs now, and so he's trying to get back on his feet.
That's great. I mean, he's the Navigator, right? So he's Navigator. That's fantastic, though. If Hollywood likes anything, it's a comeback story.
Yeah.
So that's perfect.
Right.
What's your favorite memory of that movie?
I think when we first ran it and the spaceship changed shape and the audience went crazy. It was kind of like back in the days of Star Wars when they went into hyperspace.
Yep.
And how the audience all reacted. These effects, when they hadn't been seen before, it really hit audiences in a big way.
I'm sure. Now, in that film, you had Paul Rubens, who is credited as Paul Mall, because you guys didn't, I guess, want people to know that was Pee Wee Herman, doing the voice.
He
Although
didn't want anyone to know.
He did.
He wanted, yeah.
Okay,
He
but
did the voice of Max, right?
yeah, he did the voice of
that's
Max,
right,
like when
yeah.
it turns into the more
Yeah.
comedic voice, yeah. And then that led
Yeah.
into, and I don't want to want to get to more present time stuff, but that did lead into, I'm guessing, Big Top Pee Wee, which you directed.
Yes,
after
that's
that.
right. Paul asked me to do Big Top Pee Wee after working with him on Flight of the Navigator.
Nice, because he had done, I guess, the Pee Wee's Big Adventure with Tim Burton.
Yeah.
In
Right.
Before that, and then this was his second film.
Right.
Nice.
That's right.
Okay, and then, man, I'm looking at all these titles, man. White Fang, I love this movie. So I've seen, I think, 5 movies with my mother in my lifetime. She passed away a few months ago. I've seen 5 movies with her in my life, and White Fang was one of them.
Oh, yeah.
So it brings that kind of, sweet memory of that film. It was actually mine and my brother's favorite film for a long time. I love that one. Geez, I want to talk about it, but we're running out of time. So let's see. Honey, I Blew Up the Kid. That was another big one for us early '90s kids. It's a sequel to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Now you have a King Kong version.
Yeah.
Okay, I got to mention that one really quick. How was it working with Rick Moranis, who's like a legend and unfortunately doesn't really perform anymore as an actor? Any memories of that?
Rick is a great comedian and very good at timing and, good at improv. I mean, we were working with a 2-year-old and he was doing improvs that we left in that turned out really well. That's what I think was my most favorite memory of Rick, is how he worked with a 2-year-old.
Right. You also did the Disney ride Honey, I Shrunk the Audience, which was popular.
That's right.
At Disney for a while. I'm guessing that like the Honey, I Blew Up the Kid kind of led into you being able to do that one for Disney.
Yes, with Eric Idle, from the Monty Python group. Yeah, that was a lot of fun to work in 70mm 3D, and that kind of led to my interest in virtual reality, which it kind of was. Honey, I Shrunk the Audience was a kind of a virtual reality because the whole audience was. It felt like you were shrunk, and there's 4D effects, water spraying on people and things going on tickling the feet, and the whole theater would move on a motion base. So that was kind of like a type of virtual reality.
Right.
And when I saw the Oculus Rift, my brother Jeff, who was very tech oriented, showed me it like years and years ago. I thought, wow. This is a format, a new way of storytelling that needs to be done with actors, and I think I immediately remembered a script I wrote when I was in college called Defrost, and I updated it and adapted it to this new medium, and in it, the audience or the viewer becomes the character of this woman who's been frozen for 30 years, and she wakes up and she meets her family, and they've all changed. So it's all done from her point of view, and when you wear the goggles and do it, you start to feel that you are her. And it's 12 5-minute episodes, and by the end of the 12 5-minute episodes, you feel like you've been her, and it's happened to you. It's kind of an unusual format, the virtual reality.
That's awesome. I didn't realize this actually was a script you had originally written for the normal quote unquote film medium before, and you upped it. That's awesome. What I like about this, because I've watched a bunch of the clips of it, and what I like is it's like, okay, we've seen cryogenic freezing before, but we've never really seen it as a sci-fi drama of sorts. This idea of experiencing through the eyes of somebody who wakes up, and all these people you loved and the closest to you are now complete strangers.
Correct.
I love
That's
that
true.
isolation factor of it.
Well, yes, I wrote it 30 years ago, about 30 years in the future, so it's kind of weird. And it was also, I was imagining what it would be like in the future to wake up after being frozen. And
right.
It's fascinating because her little daughter is now a mother and has a kid, and her husband, who she loved very much, now looks like his father. So there's all that drama that goes on in her head, and you hear her thoughts, but she can't speak because she had a stroke. She can't move, she can't speak. So she's just sitting in this chair like the viewer is.
Right. So it's basically, it's you. It's you. So you're here in the inner monologue because you're being her. And I like, how the sound they took out, I guess they upped the bass of it or whatever. So it feels like it's the voice in your head, from the sound engineers. They're like, okay, how do we make it sound like it's your inner monologue?
That's right.
I love that. That's awesome. And then you cast yourself as the guy wheeling her around in the wheelchair because you don't like being in Video Village. Is that right? You like actually being down there with the actors?
No, actually, there's no way to be close to the actors if you are in a VR situation because the camera looks everywhere.
Right.
And I wanted to be able to see what they're doing, and there was really no way at the time when we shot it to have a Video Village. There was no connection. You had to be there on the set, and so that's why I just became the wheelchair pusher, and that way I could watch everything that the actors were doing behind the viewer.
So you said, Honey, I Shrunk the Audience it was like kind of your first foray into a medium that wasn't the same as what you had grown up doing or you had been used to. And you're taught, you went to film school, you're taught all these rules and boundaries to filmmaking. And then all of a sudden you're in VR and you're like, oh, now the boundaries are blurred or ripped down and broken into little pieces completely and there are no boundaries. What's that like?
That's what's so exciting about it. It was like going back to film school where there's no rules and you're trying to figure things out and experiment. And I think that all the students that are in all the thousands of film schools around the world, they have the time and to experiment and do. They will become the people who figure out how to do VR, AR in a really, really great way. And the next phase of storytelling will be done by these students because they have the time, they have the energy, and they don't have to worry about making money, so they can experiment all they want.
Right.
I think VR. I mean, the great thing about VR for me is that as a storyteller and someone that wants to experience certain things, it allows you to. It allows you to be interact with certain things that you want to write about.
Right.
Whether if you want to write about Australia, you can experience Australia in VR. If you just you financially can't fly to Australia or don't have the time, but you want to experience it and you want to see what the culture there and so because if it's a part of your story, you get to experience that.
Yeah,
and that's the great thing.
And it gives you that way of every time you do it, you can watch it over and over and have a different experience every time.
Correct.
You can look anywhere. You're 360 degrees. You're like, who do I want to concentrate on at this time? And everybody needs to be performing like a stage play, right? Yeah. So you're looking at this guy over here, but then this guy over here is doing something or is on the phone or doing something. And it's like, oh, the next time I missed that, when I watch it again, I'm going to watch him. I love that.
Let me ask you this question because I think like Defrost, I think the incredible thing about it is that in the medical field, this series is so useful to families that either had a person that is in a stroke or has some time in a coma or certain conditions where they can't communicate, and they get to see this and almost have empathy or almost have a feeling of comfort that the person, there is still a connect.
Absolutely true. And you know what? My master's thesis film, Peach, is very similar because it's about my grandmother who was had a stroke and couldn't speak. So, it's kind of like what my first project is similar to my most recent project because you become that character that I originally did in my master's thesis.
Right. I love that.
This is so incredible.
That's awesome. Yeah. And let's talk about the all-star cast in this. I mean, you have Carl Weathers, Apollo Creed himself, also from Predator. Like one of my favorites is in this film. You have Bruce Davison from X-Men, who you mentioned earlier that you ran track against in high school, and you've known him for a long time. You have Chris Atkins from Blue Lagoon. Veronica Cartwright, the mother from Flight of the Navigator. Yeah. She's in this.
And Alien, she was in Alien, the one that got sprayed with blood.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, exactly. In Alien. Yeah. I didn't want to mention that because she had a terrible fate. At least Flight of the Navigator, she had a good ending to that, good story.
Yes, I just like that more.
Yeah, but you got this all-star cast of people with these sci-fi experiences so it's sort of like, you watch The Expendables and you go, oh, these are all the 80s action guys, all the people from all the action films. We know that they know this genre. You all of a sudden get the who's who from our favorite sci-fi films from the last 30, 40 years. Alien.
That was the idea.
Beautiful. I love that. All right, good. So this movie, so this is it's a series. It's a series. It's 12 episodes, 5 minutes each. It's being released on April 25th on VR platform veer.tv, right? VEER.tv, which is available. Or
probably get it at www.defrostvr.com. I think we're not sure exactly where you click to it, but I think for sure we'll have a link there.
Yeah, Google will be your friend.
defrostvr.com.
I think Google will be your friend too. You just search Defrost VR. I'm sure it'll come up at that point. But we're gonna put it out on our social media and everything. We're gonna promote once we have the actual link that people can use.
Great.
And
excellent.
You can get on Oculus Go, Oculus Rift, all these. If you have a VR headset, you'll probably be able to, watch it. So.
And even if you just have a phone and one of those little cardboards, you can see it.
There you go.
There you go. Google Cardboard. I have 2 of those.
Yeah.
I do. Okay, I wanted to talk one other thing you have coming up. You have another book, not just the Grease Director's Notebook. You have another book coming up, right?
Well, I'm writing an autobiography, and then I'm writing another book called Drawing Directors, which is a series of drawings I did over the last 20 years of other directors. And so neither of those have publishers yet, but I'm going to be taking them around trying to launch them.
That's cool.
Wow. Well, you inspire me. So, you're writing the books. You got the VR series, which I love that you're finding also something that excites you newly in a thing you've been doing for a while now with VR. And I think that's awesome. So thank you so much for spending this time with us. We really appreciate it. And
okay, guys, good questions, and thank you for the opportunity to promote my VR series.
Absolutely,
yes.
And
yeah.
Thank you for all you've done. All these
you.
movies. Seriously, like they're an important part of our lives, and I'm sure you know that. You sound like a humble guy, but just take our platitudes and just realize they're honest and genuine.
Hey, great, guys.
All right, guys, thank you for joining us here at Get to the Podcast. Let's get to the podcast with the number 2. My name is Diego D'Souza.
I'm Nick Gambino.
And I'm Neil Carson.
Summer loving
Had me a blast.
Summer loving happened so fast. I met a girl crazy for me. I met a boy cute as can be.
We're nailing it. We should do the next Broadway revival.
Right?
Next Broadway revival.
Oh, well.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.